Greetings, this is the Questing here. This is going to be a rather unusual quest-long series of videos. I received a rather surprising, delightfully surprising invitation from someone that I've been interacting with on the online spaces of the role-playing places that I like to hang out. And so I received an invitation from Runeslinger, as you may know of his channel, and I will definitely be providing links to his specific channel, and there will be many more links I will be providing from that particular channel among others. So I received an invitation from Runeslinger on the morning of 8th of November, I believe, 2020, and it was a rather surprising message asking me, or it was an invitation to say, would you like to play a Star Trek game of Star Trek Adventures set in the original series era? I guess just to give a little bit of context of why this is entirely surprising for myself is that, you know, despite having numerous interactions with Anthony in and most of those interactions I would say takes place within the Facebook group of the RPG Techniques Consortium, I was not entirely expecting to be invited or even to have an opportunity to actually play with Runeslinger. I have definitely been watching many of his videos even before I actually got to interact with him online in the virtual space. I've read some of his blogs. I've actually been subscribed to his channel, or way before I actually had the chance to really interact with him. So it was unexpected. It was, to put it quite simply, and it definitely felt like an honor for myself to, be one of the people that he had thought of when he wanted to run a Star Trek Adventures campaign. Despite the delightfulness of the invitation, there were definitely a few concerns that I had in regards to being granted this honor. And the first among which was the first question that I asked Runeslinger was that, is it all right for me to be in your game if I knew nothing about the rules and not so much about the Star Trek franchise and the universe and pretty much its lore? His answer to my question was no, it will not be a barrier. If I were to join this game, I would be playing with other players who are also as unfamiliar with the rule system as me, but they probably have more attachments, at least more familiarity with the Star Trek universe, its TV shows and the like. But I think to set the tone, or at least the context for which many of these future videos for this particular adventure or campaign, I think I need to talk a little bit about my own relationship, my own familiarity with Star Trek, both Star Trek Adventures as the system and Star Trek as the franchise and the universe. I was not raised as a Trekkie. In fact, the availability of Star Trek back in, I would say, in the 80s and 90s, during the decade that I was born, was actually mostly tied with the Next Generation, and during its syndicated run on our national television at the time, which I believe was in the 90s, I was only merely just under a decade or just past a decade old. It was never really in my media radar, in the sense that it was never really part of the pop culture that I consumed as a child, partly maybe because of the prohibitive hours that we will screen, and also maybe because I was not particularly intellectual demographic for a show of Star Trek: The Next Generation, especially when you had to contend with a much more exciting, much more simpler Star Wars franchise. I only learned to to understand, much later appreciate Star Trek much later, and even then I would say quite recently. Most recently was obviously during the introduction of the Star Trek Adventures game, which I only got in touch with, I would say maybe a year ago in 2019. And I figured that if I was going to learn a system or a rule set related with the Star Trek franchise, then it's probably time to not entirely revisit, but at least visit it with a lens that I know what is happening and I know what am I looking for in relation to learning an RPG system related to it, to the source material. So obviously I went back to the one that I've actually been exposed to or actually seen, which is Next Generation. And when Runeslinger made the invitation that we are going to be playing in the original series, I was definitely as blank as knowing what the original series was like as compared to Next Generation. You might think I would have thought that there may have been a lot of similarities, but given the original series was made in the 60s, or at least was aired in the 60s, compared with Next Generation, which was the late 80s, there is a significant gap in terms of technology, and maybe even some of the cultural zeitgeist that was being addressed at the time. The cast was definitely different, and the episode length and the number of seasons that were made were definitely different. So it was not a good assumption to make that the original series of Star Trek was going to be like the Next Generation, but maybe, more dated. And I'm glad that I did not make that assumption as I started watching a few recommended episodes, in fact, by Runeslinger in regards to how the campaign would look like. So the other reason why I'm making this video, and this will be the start, this will be the first of many videos in relation with this campaign of Star Trek Adventures, is because we as a group have sort of decided, or at least it is part of our play experience, that we are to make videos for us to share our own thoughts and our own reflections as play begins and as play continues in this case. So this particular video is going to be focused on the timeline or the thoughts that I had during the early days of this particular campaign, before we even began play itself, and before I actually do talk about why I decided to say yes. Probably one other event why I was invited into the game is that among the groups where myself and Runeslinger are present, one of them happens to be the RPG learning group, also on Facebook, same with the RPG Techniques Consortium. And it was there I actually posted my series of videos of learning the Star Trek Adventures Quick Start. It was an entire series that covered the most of the mechanics of the Quick Start, including the pre-gens. I did not venture into the pre-made adventure, but since that series of videos had concluded, I had not had the opportunity to actually run, much less play in a Star Trek Adventures game, as I intended to when I learned the Star Trek Adventures. And I actually even picked up a bundle of Star Trek Adventure books due to the timely discounts that were given at the time for Star Trek Adventures. So I would say that my resources, or my materials for Star Trek Adventures, is actually quite, I would say, enough to sustain a rather long campaign. But in any case, the opportunity hasn't presented itself, especially more so during the entrance into the early months of 2020. And as the world goes upside down a little bit, that opportunity has only just dwindled, and I was also caught up in the tours of a ongoing Dungeons and Dragons campaign. It was all just a matter of timing, and that included the timing that Runeslinger came with the invitation, which was a delightful and hard to resist offer. Which brings me into why I said yes to his invitation. So the reasons for that, being the obvious thing that I'm given the opportunity to actually play Star Trek Adventures, which I had somewhat learned and somewhat forgotten. One of my first reasons for saying yes, particularly to Star Trek Adventures, was actually more to the rule set itself rather than my attachments with the franchise. As you may know, is not entirely the strongest in retrospect among the other players. I felt that Star Trek Adventures was probably the more accessible 2D20 system in terms of its name recognition. That was actually the main reason why I wanted to play Star Trek Adventures. That was not the only motivation for saying yes. By saying yes to this campaign, it was going to be a first of many things for myself as a person who plays role-playing games. First of all, is I will be playing online, which is not entirely novel by this point. And I already have been playing online with my own local group due to travel restrictions and social gathering restrictions due to our because of the pandemic. But to be able to play online with entirely new people that I would have never met otherwise, on a meet space. So that was quite a novel thing for me, that I would be playing online with people that I could have only met online. It was definitely an honor to be invited to play with Runeslinger, and for me to later on find out that I would also be playing with Ron Edwards from AdeptPlay. And if you heard of the name Ron Edwards, or if you heard of the thing called GNS theory, then you would know who Ron Edwards is. And it was definitely one of the things that I found out much earlier, before actually even being presented this invitation and opportunity. So another first of by saying for playing in this campaign was that this would be recorded play, and this is actually quite interesting or quite challenging when you think that online play is hard enough. This is going to be recorded. This is going to be published or broadcasted from a YouTube channel, consumed publicly for people to either have their impressions upon, to either be used as a reference, or to be maybe even used for entertainment. So it definitely did put some questions of performance, but I think at this point, and I think as a group, we have sort of agreed that performance is not our main goal for this play. It is merely more for a record, and I would think mostly for our own benefit rather than for public benefit. And thirdly, it was obviously the reason that the people that I'm playing with, Runeslinger, Ron Edwards, and as well as I believe it's a friend of Runeslinger. But the fact that I'm playing with new people outside of my normal options of players available to me in my immediate surroundings, I think is a good way to expose myself to different cultures of play, broadening my horizons in terms of how other people or other cultures play role-playing games. So I was definitely glad to be in good company, thanks to the invitation that's been extended by Runeslinger to the many people. And so I said yes, and we figured out a appropriate time for our group to meet. And I can tell you from personal experience, even before this this particular campaign, is that when you are trying to arrange timing across time zones, it is probably one of the major killers of why such campaigns do not even lift off in the first place. Especially given that I myself particularly live on pretty much the other end of where the mass of role players on the online space you tend to live in. So I'm quite grateful that our time zones, our differences in time zones for this particular campaign hasn't been too drastic, hasn't been too far apart. So it is still quite feasible, at least, to find a common time for us to actually be possible to meet at least consistently. What are my objectives of what are my objectives of being in this campaign? The first one would obviously be to exercise the rules as I've understood them, and obviously to try to enhance my knowledge of said rules, and taking this play as a learning opportunity, obviously, because what you read is very different from what you play, and the learning process can only be completed through play. In my case, it's not to say that I'll be taking this as more of an experiment. It's more that this is going to be a perfect opportunity to be able to learn the game by reading and through many readings, because this is no longer the quick start. This is the core rules by itself, and also to learn and also to see those rules come into action through play. Second objective is to enrich my knowledge and my relationship with the Star Trek franchise, the universe. And what better place to start with from the original series, because I think that is the one I feel at least I should start with, and therefore that would inform my taste and appeals with later series of the franchise. And thirdly, I think, as is the usual case when it comes for me to learning new RPGs and playing new RPGs or running new RPGs, is trying to create or at least to experience story building through mechanics and rules, and particularly how is that done with the 2D20 system. And I might be surprised with the versatility and the so-called autorial actions that you are allowed to perform with the rules. And that has definitely been one of my main interests when it comes to role-playing games. Do I have any real expectations for the campaign? As much as I would like to say, I don't like to have these expectations, especially if they are the ones that will sort of give me wrong assumptions about the game, or the wrong assumptions about the people that I'm playing with. I cannot deny that there are definitely some hopeful things that I would like to happen, but for me to expect them to happen, I think would be a bit too far-fetched, and I think in some cases even unfair. But nevertheless, given the people that I'm playing with, and the fact that these are not the kind of people that I would normally get to play with, I would definitely and also the fact that, given my interactions and also my exposure to both Runeslinger and Ron Edwards' thoughts about RPGs, which I am an admirer of their work, I would hope that I would be able to be engaged on a higher level or a more advanced level of play skills and techniques. And given that we are I would say maybe we are all somewhat interested on meta mechanics in a way, that or at least are able to apply some meta views on mechanics and how it affects our play. I think it would be a interesting experiment for the most part, that as we use the rules, not only to have fun as our characters, but I think we will also get a lot of fun exploring how the relationship between mechanics and the meta, and trying to analyze or dissect or even to understand how the rules does this. So I guess the easiest or simplest expectation that I really have for this campaign is that it would be both a learning experience, but I think it will also be a very valuable experience because it's recorded. It's something that we have. It creates a reference for us that I can go back to into understanding things that I may have missed earlier or during the heat of the moment. And it will definitely be valuable if I have the time to fully dissect and digest what the experience has become or will become, and making of this video and many others like it in the future would probably be a reflection or a capture in the moment of my thoughts in from this particular angle. So we've managed to, at this point in our get together, we had our session 0, and you can watch almost the entirety of the session 0 in one of the videos that I will link to, and also available in the much larger playlist that Runeslinger has now collected and compiled for the entirety of Star Trek, for this particular Star Trek Adventures campaign, which we have duly named First Response. And part of the reason for that is because as a group, we have agreed that our ship's mission, and our ship being named the Avicenni, named after the famous Arabian or Persian medicine, modern medicine man. So our ship mission is more focused on crisis response, and that may involve with helping out planets that are either caught in disasters or major conflicts that may draw us into areas of the Federation that would considerably be dangerous in terms of borders and protection. That is one of the things that the campaign that we have agreed on is going to be about. That may be the major setting or circumstance that our crew and our ship would probably find itself in, but there are also interesting inter-character dynamics that are going to be in play, and one of which I think is the most exciting for me to see unfold is the diversified crew, and this may come as a bit of a surprise for someone who may be more familiar with later series of the Star Trek franchise, but this was particularly highlighted in the original series due to the relative absence of non-human members of the crew, and when there is such a member on the crew, what is the interactions and what is the relationship between the human and the non-humans. But in our cases, our ship is actually being staffed quite readily with non-humans. We actually even have a Vulcan, a non-human, taking up the captain's chair, whether formally or not, is going to be one of the underpinning uh, tensions as well as circumstance that the human crew would have to confront and face, and maybe either come into terms with, or maybe something else could happen within the Epicena that would be quite unsightly by modern or future Starfleet standards. But nevertheless, I think to have internal tensions that is pressurized by external tensions, I think would make for both interesting role-playing experience as well as maybe great story development for a much larger campaign. So if everything you've heard so far that I've said on this pre-play reflections for our Star Trek Adventures campaign First Response is interesting to you, and you would definitely like to know more, you would like to follow on our going-ons as we play, or you would like to hear a different perspective from other players, and this is something that I've said much earlier, that this video and this particular series of videos that I'll be making, despite it being encouraged by the other group members, by Runeslinger, Ron Edwards, that we should make videos to talk about our own thoughts about the campaign as a whole and in the future. These thoughts are only meant to reflect my thoughts, my own personal thoughts, and these thoughts are not in any way influence or even takes into consideration what others may say. So that's definitely both a interesting take on how we are going to be using our experiences, and how are we going to digest our experiences to produce maybe hopefully some valuable insights, both inside the game and outside the game. So I would say if you're interested in just watching the sessions, or if you are interested in finding out what others had to say at particular points of play in time, I would definitely highly encourage you to check out the playlist that has been compiled on Runeslinger, which I will definitely be providing the links as well. So there will, as I said, there will be many links from Runeslinger, but I guess that is the best channel and best place to get all your Star Trek Adventures First Response needs. And who knows, maybe once all these videos have been put together and compiled, and maybe we can make a much more concentrated or more congregated videos to make either final reflections as a group. I hope you will be following me on this journey in terms of playing a new game, playing with new people, and doing it in a new way. So I hope to see you all soon, and I will be back with another video to talk about one more thing before we actually talk about the first session of Star Trek Adventures First Response.